about President Zuma so that the MK Students Movement, the Youth League, and the young people of South Africa and the generations to come, just who are we talking about? Biography. We speak about President Jacob Zuma. He was born exactly 83 years ago on the 12th of April 1942 in Nkandla. So Nkandla is not the name of his home state. Nkandla is a very huge area, it's a municipality in the King Totayo region of KwaZulu-Natal. The area, specific area that President Zuma was born in is called KwaDakwaDunuze. So those who can translate that can translate as to what that means. And he spent most of his youth and early stages in KwaDakwaDunuze. But at the age of 17, he joined the African National Congress. Because when he joined the African National Congress in 1958, 1959, it was still the only fighting instrument in the hands of black people. Black people did not have a vehicle to fight for their emancipation. There was no any other instrument to fight for total emancipation. He then joined the African National Congress. He actually says that when he was joining, I heard him say that myself, that he was so fervent to join earlier that he had to not give his correct age so that they could allow him to join the African National Congress. He later on joined the South African Communist Party, recruited by one of the great trade unionists called Moses Mabhida, who was the General Secretary at some stage of the South African Congress of Trade Unions, SACTU, who also became the General Secretary of the South African Communist Party. So President Zuma, amongst others, is a product of General Secretary Moses Mabhida. President Zuma was in 1963 when he was joining Umkhonto of the Liberation Army. Now let's understand this clearly. Umkhonto of the Liberation Army is launched on the 16th of December 1961 with a clarion call which starts with the question of, there comes a time at a period of a nation whether you decide, when you have to decide whether you submit or you fight. And the decision of Umkhonto Sizwe, the Liberation Army, was to fight. Umkhonto Sizwe is launched officially on 16 December 1961. And already as part of the first consignment of recruits into Umkhonto Sizwe, the Liberation Army, part of those included President Jacob Zuma in his early 20s, in his late teens, early 20s. But you have got people at the ages of 18, 19, 20 who are still saying, no, I want mama for this, mama for this, mama for that. By that time, President Zuma was willing to take up arms to fight, to kill for the revolution of our people. And he was then arrested in 1963 at the age of 21 and sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was then taken to Robben Island for exactly 10 years. And he spent the 10 years in Robben Island, not just as a prisoner, also as a student of the revolution, as a student of what should be done, what is to be done. Amongst his many teachers in Robben Island was Comrade Harry Gwala. President Zuma speaks fondly and memorably, vividly about the political schools that will be run by Comrade Harry Gwala in Robben Island. And he was in Robben Island at the same time as the time of the Rivonia trialists. But Robben Island was divided. There were those who were arrested in the 60s later, were separated from the Rivonia trialist of Nelson Mandela, Govan Mbeki, Walter Sisulu, and Rumlange. But the divisions, the sections where President Zuma was, used to always consult with the leadership of the Liberation Forces or other section of Robben Island. So he always recounts, I know this firsthand, of a discussion which took years on whether the African National Congress is socialist in character or capitalist in character. And the section where President Zuma was discussed over many years, wrote a document and sent to the other side that please resolve this question. And then they came back after more than a year and said the reason we couldn't come back to you is because even ourselves were not found each other as to just whether we are socialist in character or capitalist in character. But one thing that we can affirm is that our struggles as of now are defined by the aims and objectives of the Freedom Charter. So the Freedom Charter has been a clarion call, a uniting perspective of all the movement that fought against apartheid and colonialism. Do you know the African National Congress was never a threat to the colonial and apartheid government until the adoption of the Freedom Charter. Until the adoption of the Freedom Charter that said that no government can claim authority over the people unless it is based on their will. There was no threat on the apartheid government until a Freedom Charter that said the mineral wealth beneath the soil, the banks and monopoly industry shall be transferred to the ownership of the people as a whole. That is why when what was called the treason trial happened, when the leaders of different progressive formations were arrested, when they were taken to court, the prosecutors' exhibit 1 in the evidence of treason was the Freedom Charter. To say that you advocate for this communist document, you advocate for this document which wants to take away white domination over the economy, white domination over society, white domination over political power of South Africa. So exhibit 1 in the court of law in the treason trial was the Freedom Charter. And that is the ideals that President Zuma stands for. Make no mistake, you can go and listen. All of us now have got access to the so many perspectives and the interviews that President Zuma does. When he was in Ghana on the 7th of January 2025, on the 8th, he conducted an interview with Channel 1 TV. You must attentively listen as to how he places the Freedom Charter at the center of our struggle as Umkhonto Sizwe. You must listen to the interview he did substantially with RT, like Russia Television, and how he places at the center of our struggle the Freedom Charter. And why is it relevant is because it has been a clarion call for all the revolutionary forces. So if you have not yet come across the many other documents and perspectives of Umkhonto Sizwe, just go and read the Freedom Charter and understand what it says. Our constitution now says, amongst other perspectives that are going to drive the agenda of Umkhonto Sizwe, will be the Freedom Charter. So President Zuma understood the Freedom Charter and its essence when he was imprisoned for 10 years in Robben Island as a political prisoner. He was released in 1973. And in that intervening period, he then got married to Makumalo. It's very important to say that. And then 1973, got married. 1974, he then led the African National Congress underground formations in the Natal province. In 1975, he went to Swaziland. He was going there for a mission. He was not going first to be exiled for the many years where he was exiled. He was going on a mission with an understanding that he's still a newlywed young person. Just going into Swaziland and had to come back. But when he got there, he was then instructed that he must remain in Swaziland. That is when his exile years began. He spent all the years from 1975 until the early 1990s in exile. He was a chief representative of the African National Congress in Mozambique. He led the intelligence department of Umkhonto Sizwe, the Liberation Army. He trained and received majority of those who went to exile after the June 16, 1976 uprising. So after the June 16 uprising here in Soweto, there was an outflux from South Africa of exiles who went to join Umkhonto Sizwe, the Liberation Army. And a substantial number of those were received and trained by President Jacob Zuma. Trained them politically and trained them militarily with an understanding of what later on got to be said by Thomas Sankara, that a soldier without proper ideological and political training is a potential criminal. So throughout his life, he got to do that work. And then when the African National Congress and other liberation movements were unbanned, they then came back to South Africa. In 1991, the African National Congress held its conference in KwaZulu-Natal in Durban, Westville. President Zuma was elected as the Deputy Secretary General of the ANC, DSG of the ANC. His SG was someone else, I forgot his name, he comes from around here. And he knew then that it was a mistake for a liberation movement to elect whoever was his SG when he was a DSG. But he remained with humility. So here's a situation, 1991. He is a national official of the African National Congress. Despite that, in 1994, when the democratic dispensation is ushered in, he was leading the Southern Natal component of the three regions of the Natal province. And then he subsequently became the chair of the Natal province. But when elections happened in 1994, 27 April, he is an official of the ANC. People get elected, they go to parliament. President Mandela says to him, come in and form part of the national cabinet. He says, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm still here in the province. He then, with humility, participated in the government of KwaZulu-Natal, which was led by the IFP. That demonstrates humility, comrades. That even when you have got strong struggle credentials, even when you know that you have been exposed to higher platforms, if you want to be a leader, you must also accept to be led at some stage. It can't be that every time that, no, it's me here. I'm in control every time there's a leadership issue. It's me. President Zuma was a member of the Executive Council and MEC in the KwaZulu-Natal government, which was not led by a party that he belonged to for many years, despite being an official of the African National Congress. Despite having weekly meetings with the head of state, with President Mandela and all of those things, after that, back to KwaZulu-Natal.